The path to socioeconomic progress is a long one, so I'm taking it step by step. I'm Tindani Mpulabusi L, and I'm a young guy that's been making my contribution to cultural and heritage preservation since a young age, using multimedia skills and other types of engagement with the public. I've been walking this road for a while, and since it's the 50th anniversary of the March on Washington and the 150th anniversary of signing the Emancipation Proclamation, we're going to explore what's going on. I'm here at Alpha Street Baptist Church in Alexandria, Virginia. I'm about to step on this panel, or should I say sit on this panel, about slavery, civil rights, then and now kind of thing. And I'm going to keep it 1,000. So tune in to see what I'm going to say and see what the other panelists have to say. We're definitely destined to have a great discussion, great conversation. Hopefully follow it with some action,
to come by for this 5th anniversary of the Freedom House Museum. It's a big deal. It's poetic justice that the Franklin and Armfield slave market of Old Town, which was really the largest slave market in this country, and at that time it may have been in the world because we were the worst perpetrators. So appropriate, albeit ironic, that it be dedicated to Reverend Henry Louis Bailey.
I'm so happy to be here. Happy to be here with the panel members.
I live in Ward 8. If you know anything about DC, the city's changing from chocolate city to chocolate chip. And what I'm focused on right now, a lot of economic justice issues, which
look at the correspondence in the 17th, 18th, 19th century, you see that in the conversation black folks are having even in this country, but you also see in the Caribbean, Latin America. They didn't refer to themselves as slaves as such. That term comes into the parlance as a consequence of the state actors that enslaved them. So that identity is first thing politically. So what that, as a consequence, the identity of African people to this day is very much as a partial citizen. We're still negotiating for our citizenship. As a matter of law, really, if you look at it.
Centuries of free labor, followed by nearly a century of additional free labor under the guise of the Black Codes, followed by Jim Crow segregation that was also coupled with a dual labor market in the North that created a situation where people's work was severely undervalued. Think about that going on for centuries upon centuries upon centuries, where this nation was able to accumulate wealth through the exploitation of either free labor or severely reduced labor costs, which continued until very recent history. If you look at the point of the 1964 Civil Rights Act, for example, and the 1965 Voting Rights Act as the first sort of major litigious ways, or maybe perhaps the last major litigious ways in which government-sanctioned discrimination was finally dealt with in this country, we are less than 50 years into freedom, if you really want to think about it in that way. And I would argue that there still remains, there still remains vestiges of those dual realities when you look at the wage gaps that continue to exist, not only across gender, but also across race in this country. And especially compounded when you are a Black woman, because you face it as it relates to gender and race. And so when you look at all of those things, and you look at what really is king in this country, which is money, slavery is very much the reason why we are the economic powerhouse that we are today as a nation. And so to deny that history and to deny that fact really is an insult and a slap in the face to those individuals who were so severely severely exploited for centuries, and the remnants of that exploitation, frankly, still remains today.
If you told me slavery was a crutch, I would ask you about the nature of a wound. The nature of a wound is something different when it's stitched up and healed. But if the wound is open, still leaking, bleeding, you cannot say that it is a crutch. And let me tell you that it's still leaking, open, bleeding. If you look at the work of Dr. Claude Anderson, he had a book, it's called Black Labor, White Wealth. What he really explains is that throughout the Reconstruction period, the same people who were in charge of the plantations are now in charge of the corporations. So what is the difference? Remember, the same people who were slave traders, they were trading companies. They were corporations back then, corporations now. The idea that African Americans do not control the institutions in which they, often are facilitators for, this is an economic issue. The issue is in economics. We have more black leadership than ever in politics and in corporations. But where do the resources go? Who do they impact? Where are these corporations, where these people really invest their resources? And who really makes the decisions about the flow of economics? So until we hear this economic problem, we can't talk about emancipation from slavery because it was what? Based on economics in the first place. And African Americans still have an economic problem, and the treatment and brutality exists. We have a gap between administrators, and we have class gaps. We have people who are in these positions, but they don't see what I see every day walking through Southeast DC. We have to deal with illusion as African Americans right now. For those of us who believe in things because we want them to be that way, and then there are people who just won't look at things for the way they really are. And that's one of the main things we have to deal with dealing with this issue. The difference between reality and the difference between dreams and ideas.
Mr. Michael Bell.
Coming from a artistic and a cultural standpoint and being a designer, I understand the power of the visual image and the power of the spoken word and the power of texture and color and putting all that together to tell a story. And really, we have to look at how things are changing now. Technology has changed the way everybody does everything. Well, maybe not everybody. My mother still has a flip phone. But for the most part, if we look at our youth, they're embracing technology in ways that we couldn't have imagined at that age. And so I think with these types of institutions, that's one of the reasons why we made sure we had interactives in the museum. Because I think when you're telling history to youth, telling them about their culture, you have to do it in a way that they can embrace and they can engage and want to bring their kids. And I'll tell you, one of the biggest compliments I received when the Freedom House Museum opened 5 years ago, my 6-year-old niece at that time told me, Auntie Julian, that is the best museum I've ever been to. So that was truly a testament to how powerful those types of institutions can be in getting our kids to know, understand, and embrace their history.
I would say, we often ask our students to ask first order questions. What's the question that frames every other question? And for me, the question you asked raises a question. What is a museum and where do they come from? Museums are a very recent phenomenon in human history. They narrate identity. That's what bonds people, holds people together. So when I think about museums, and you've been to museums in South Africa, France, Austria, Ghana, you go around and see, Egypt, they narrate national identities. The American national identity is extremely contested. Now, I'll take another maybe position on Barack Obama. I think Barack Obama's emergence is absolutely predictable if you look at history. He's basically continuing the same neoliberal policies that some of them began with Clinton, continued through Bush. And Andrew Sullivan wrote about this in New York. He said, if Barack Obama hadn't existed, they would have had to make him up at some point. You can't keep running old white dudes out with the face of American power. So, he's entirely predictable. Now, as was our response, because the American identity is narrated as, you started from nothing, look how far you've come. If that Museum of African American History narrates our identity that way, then it's going to do more damage. Because see, the America that is trying to be narrated in all these places, including a place like Arlington, and Congressman, I'm so glad to hear you talk a little bit about Arlington. Because understand, that plantation was cleared by Martha Washington's enslaved Africans, 40 of which she gave their granddaughter to the Custis line. Then she ends up marrying into the Robert E. Lee line. That whole narrative out there is a black narrative. Freedom's Village is out there, Sojourner Truth is out there. And when you go out there, it is not narrated that way by the park rangers, except for the couple of little black ones that are out there. I'm serious. No, I'm very serious about that. This is sacred ground. When I go out there, I go for Colonel Charles Young and Medgar Evers and Thurgood Marshall and all the Africans in the U.S. colored troops, many of whom were over there at Toussaint Louverture Hospital, who had to petition to get buried over there. But the American narrative puts us in as naked in chains, talking about gives us free. And at the end of all these museums, they stick a picture of Barack Obama in and say, look, it's over, now it's your fault. I'm serious, and I'll end with this for now. This is critical. Because if you want to understand the importance of museums, travel the world and see how people narrate their identities. Go to the Apartheid Museum in Johannesburg and see how South Africa is creating its identity. Go to the Egyptian National Museum in Cairo and see how they've linked that. People curating that museum who were not there when Africans built those pyramids, but who are now appended themselves to the Egyptian narrative. Or more importantly, go to the place where museums were created, Europe. Which basically, you know what museums are? They are storing houses for the stuff you took from other people, and you narrate your greatness through those halls. So I don't know what an African-American museum should look like that begins with slavery. I really don't.
Any African-American institution that should have the information, the benefit of African-Americans in mind, I would say be for real and keep it real. As there's so many superficial things that go on within these institutions. One of the things that I've heard from a lot of, as a younger guy, mid-20s, this is like 06, and I get this gig doing this community development type of thing. And they sit you down and say, yeah, we want to invest in our young black men and help you go to college and all this kind of stuff. Only to find out that a lot of this thing is a social club, a lot of this thing is about, you this sexual orientation, you that sexual orientation, jump when I say jump. That people are so focused on numbers and hitting benchmarks that the quality of what they offer to the community is nowhere. Because you can sit 50 kids in the seat, but then when they get up, then what they do? I'd rather have that one kid that really gets it than sit 50 of them down and never get anything. And our institutions got to come back down to earth. Our institutional leadership, if you're supposed to be providing, how do you plan to benefit a population and they not at the table when you make the plans? How do you program to touch young people when you don't have young people at the table when you plan to impact them? How do we do this? And I think one of the main examples throughout time was one of my favorite people in history, Tupac Shakur. You had a lot of leadership come out and say, you're offensive, you do this. Which one of those leaders invited him to lunch to share philosophy, idea, and principles with the man? But they got on the press and the media and talked about him. And disgraced him like he was a dog. So we have to really deal with some intergenerational issues if we want to be everything in the future, because we might as well charge one of these generations to the game. Because we got to realize that half of these kids that we're trying to train, they've been raised by television. What's the difference between a mother that's neglecting her children because she at work all the time, going to meetings all the time, and a mother that's neglecting her children because she's smoking a crack pipe or drinking a bottle? It's no different. Anytime you have a child in Bowie, Maryland, they want to be like a kid that has everything, 2 parents, car, job, and he want to be like a kid in Southeast DC. Why? Why does he want to be like a thug when he has privilege? These are the questions we have to ask. These are psychological dynamics that we are not dealing with. And if these institutions, whether they be the Urban League or the museum, if they are not being for real about what they say they're doing and accomplishing their mission and truly engaging people in a way that is of substance and not just form, we will continue to have these issues because appearances have become everything for everybody. People just want to appear to be doing this thing. So I say let's deal with substance in contrast with form.
How can we stop exploiting ourselves? Because we're here, and I'm assuming that we're here surrounded by a lot of leadership. So in your opinion, how do we address that?
Once again, an economic engine to empower certain populations and disempower others. Let me give you a quick example. Most of the prison construction that's going on right now are happening in very small, rural, Midwestern areas where literally people are being shipped, prisoners are being shipped to these areas, creating jobs for people that look nothing like the prisoners that are being captured there. The prisoners then spend their days laboring, making different objects, getting paid 5 cents perhaps for a day, and billions are being generated out of this system. It is amazing, and when you think about not only what's going on as a result of these laws, but if you look at what continues to happen and the interrelation between not only the prison industrial complex, but the school-to-prison pipeline, in which we have these zero-tolerance policies that end up getting our children first sort of ingrained into the prison system for offenses that many of us would have gotten a slap on the wrist for in school, maybe a day's suspension. Now, because we have policemen specifically stationed at most schools now, they become criminal occurrences which begin to create records for our children before they even graduate high school. So I say all this to say that this is a long-term problem that begins hitting our children. We've seen those images even of the little girl that's in elementary school that was handcuffed because she misbehaved in class. I mean, we as a community really need to stand up and say no more. Not on our watch. You will not take our children and build economies for other people because you are trying to just continue to create this second slavery system for our community. And it has so many implications. The implications are not only economic, the implications have to do with health. The implication has to do with the imbalance between who's available and who's not available to even be able to form marriages. You know, one of the reasons why we have such this sort of disimbalance within the Black community as it relates to just this issue of marriage is because so many of our potential mates are in jail. How are you going to marry people when they're not in your community to marry? And so the implications are huge. We just need to say enough is enough, we're fed up, and we need to push for change in that area.
Right. See, one of the things that happened a lot during segregation was people were forced to be in their own circles to accomplish their own tasks. One of the things that we had to look at is that when somebody is, what was the accomplishment? I think equality was the psychological thing, like, okay, I want the right to do what people saying I can't do. But then why would I want to patronize somebody's restaurant who don't, you know what I mean, who might poison my food or something, you know what I mean? So when you go down now, you see a lot of the mom and pops, like going to Anacostia, going to average African American community, PG County, Prince George's County is supposed to be the richest per capita income in the nation or the world of African Americans, right? But when you do that, the income ratio, we don't know how rich they are because most of the businesses are not managed, you know what I mean? We look at the people who do business right now, and a lot of the communities where this majority African American, a lot of the companies whom they consume from, they're not managed or owned and operated by African Americans, so the dollar doesn't circulate. A lot of my elders tell me that integration made that worse because it's not about race integration and socialization. It's about economic consumerism, and we constantly purchase products that we don't produce. So that Escalade, that Cadillac, woke up in a Bugatti, first of all, I don't even know how it got in it. How did you end up waking up in the Bugatti? How did you fall asleep in it? But you know, a lot of the images, the thing, the clothes we want, half of the designers come out and they make statements like, we don't even want you wearing our clothes, you know what I mean? We love to spend our money with these things. So we have a real problem with integrating our dollars with each other, is what I'm gonna say. And I'm gonna say through a lot of the economic problems, if we built the economic base, it could deal with those social, those psychological issues. But until we gain institutional control through having corporations, you know, corporate control, it's hard to do it, which relates it back to the brother who asked the question about who mentioned my name. Because when we don't finance, how many black institutions commission black research and studies and send black to go do explorations around the world on artifacts? Every time I look at National Geographic, it's not a black person exploring the world, you know what I mean?
Check, 1, 2, check, 1, Young Truth, speaking at how realness, listen, so what's the topic? Do we got it, or have we lost it? How many of us are employees compared to bosses? Rhetoric is of no use, you need to stop it. Experiencing destruction, families flopping, community ain't practicing profit. Corporations be consuming sheep that's flocking. We taking steps on the path that lasts, we be rocking. Original with the style, never be jocking. Pretty women hawking, FBI watching. Why you scared? You don't know your fears make you sloppy. Predators be praying when they feel your heart hopping. Reminding me of zombies. Are you even conscious? I ain't even listening no more. Why you talking? Everybody talk the talk. Who really walking? And that's just a